John Matthews woke up before sunrise that chilly morning. The wind whispered through the tall grass surrounding his small cabin, carrying a biting chill that made him pull his coat tighter around his shoulders. He rubbed his eyes, stretched, and glanced at the empty sacks near the kitchen table. The granary was nearly bare. His children, young and full of energy, were always hungry, and his wife, Sarah, tried her best to make what little they had stretch. Today, John decided, he would travel to the nearest market to buy grain, enough to last them through the week. He stepped outside, boots crunching on the frost-covered ground. The sky was painted in shades of pink and orange as the sun rose slowly over the horizon. The journey to the trading post would take several hours on horseback. The road was not easy. It wound through uneven land, small streams, and patches of forest. But John had made this trip many times before. He had learned to be cautious and alert, especially in these lands where travelers sometimes met with bandits or hostile animals. As he rode, John thought about his family. His wife, Sarah, had been up late the night before baking a small loaf of bread from the last handful of flour. The children had gone to bed hungry, their little tummies growling as they slept. John felt a familiar pang of worry. He knew that bringing grain home would ease their hunger, but he also knew the journey could be dangerous. Still, he had no choice. The family depended on him. The trading post appeared in the distance, a small cluster of wooden buildings with smoke rising from chimneys. The scent of wood smoke and fresh earth greeted him as he tied his horse near the main square. Farmers, traders, and travelers bustled around, carrying baskets of vegetables, sacks of flour, and bundles of dried meat. John's eyes scanned the area, searching for the familiar stall where he usually bought his grain. As he walked through the crowded marketplace, he noticed something unusual. A small crowd had gathered near a corner stall he had never paid much attention to before. Curious, he moved closer, weaving carefully between people and baskets. What he saw made him stop in his tracks. At the center of the crowd stood an elderly trader, his face weathered and lined, wearing a wide-brimmed hat and a long coat. But what caught John's attention was not the trader himself, it was the woman standing beside him. She was an Apache woman, her skin sun-tanned, and her eyes dark, deep, and filled with sorrow. Her clothes were simple, tattered in places, but she carried herself with a quiet dignity. John felt a strange mix of surprise and concern. The trader's voice carried over the murmurs of the crowd. "This woman," he said, "is for sale. She is strong, skilled, and needs protection. A good home can give her safety." John frowned. He had never seen such a thing at the market before. People came here to trade grain, meat, and livestock, not human beings. His stomach churned at the thought. Kaya, the woman, did not speak. She stood silently, her eyes scanning the faces around her, taking in the crowd with a calm but wary gaze. There was a sadness about her that seemed to weigh heavily on John, as if he could feel the pain of the life she had endured. The trader continued, explaining that she had lost her husband and children in a raid, and that she had nowhere to go. "She needs a home," the trader said, "and someone willing to care for her." John's mind raced. He had come for grain, not a human being. But as he looked at Kaya, he felt a pang of sympathy. Her story, or at least the parts the trader shared, struck a chord deep inside him. He could see the loneliness in her eyes, the fear of being alone in a harsh, unforgiving land. John's hands twitched as he reached into his coat pocket, feeling the coins he had saved for the grain. The idea of paying for a person made him uneasy, but leaving her here seemed cruel. For several moments, he stood there, torn between what he had planned and what his heart told him to do. Around him, the crowd whispered and murmured, some shaking their heads, others curious or judgmental. A few children stared wide-eyed, pointing at Kaya as if she were a mysterious creature from a story. John ignored them. He focused on the woman, trying to gauge her feelings, her thoughts, and her trust. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, John spoke to the trader. "How much for her?" he asked, his voice steady but cautious. The trader named a price, higher than he had expected, but not outrageous for the times. John swallowed hard, thinking of his family, the empty granary, and the uncertain journey ahead. But then he looked again at Kaya's eyes, and he knew he could not leave her behind. He handed over the coins, feeling a mix of relief and apprehension. The trader nodded, satisfied with the transaction, and stepped aside. John gestured for Kaya to follow him. She hesitated for a moment, then took a careful step forward. Her movements were cautious, like a wild animal learning to trust again. John smiled gently, hoping she could understand that he meant no harm. As they walked toward his horse, John felt the eyes of the crowd on him. Some whispered words of admiration, others of judgment. But he did not care. He had made his choice, and he knew it was the right one. Kaya climbed onto the horse behind him, holding on lightly but firmly. She was surprisingly steady, and John marveled at her balance and strength. The journey home began, and the landscape stretched out before them in endless fields, hills, and distant forests. The wind continued to bite, but the warmth of human connection, fragile as it was, gave John a strange sense of comfort. Kaya remained mostly silent, but occasionally she glanced at him with eyes that seemed to say, "Thank you." John did not speak much either. Words felt unnecessary. Their shared understanding grew in the quiet moments between the rhythmic sounds of hooves on dirt and the soft creaking of the horse's saddle. Along the way, John noticed small details about Kaya. The way she adjusted herself on the horse, the careful way she looked at the surroundings, the quiet strength in her hands. She had survived hardships that most people in the settlement could not imagine. And yet, despite the pain she had endured, there was a calm resilience about her. John felt both admiration and responsibility. He realized that bringing her into his home meant more than offering shelter. It meant sharing his life, protecting her, and helping her heal from the invisible wounds of her past. The sun climbed higher, casting golden light across the plains. Birds chirped, and the distant sound of a river flowing offered a soothing rhythm to the journey. John thought about his family waiting at home. How would they react? How would his children feel about this unexpected guest? He hoped for understanding, but he prepared for questions and perhaps even fear. Life on the frontier was full of surprises, and this was one he could not have imagined. Hours passed as they traveled, and the bond between John and Kaya, though unspoken, began to form. Small gestures, a shared glance, a nod, a slight smile were their way of communicating. The journey was long, tiring, and at times uncomfortable. But it was also filled with quiet moments of connection and understanding. John realized that while he had set out to buy grain, he had found something far more significant, a chance to act with compassion, to extend his family's care beyond its own walls, and to confront the complexities of a harsh world with courage and empathy. By the time the homestead appeared on the horizon, the sun was beginning its descent. The cabin stood humble and welcoming amidst the open fields. Smoke curled gently from the chimney, promising warmth and food. John guided the horse carefully, ensuring Kaya's safety as they approached. He felt a sense of accomplishment, not for the coins spent, but for the choice he had made. This morning's errand, which had begun as a simple task to buy grain, had turned into a journey of moral courage and human connection, a story he knew would change the lives of everyone involved. As he dismounted, Kaya followed, her movements steady despite the long ride. John led her toward the cabin, and though words were scarce, a mutual understanding passed between them. The market had offered grain, yes, but it had also offered something far more valuable. A chance to extend kindness in a world that often seemed cruel and unforgiving. And as they reached the doorstep, John felt a quiet hope that this unusual meeting was the beginning of something transformative for them both. The journey back to John's homestead was quiet at first, filled only with the soft rhythm of the horse's hooves against the rough trail. Kaya sat behind him, her hands resting lightly on his shoulders, her eyes scanning the landscape with alertness. Though she spoke little, her presence was comforting in a way John had not expected. He was beginning to realize that the bond forming between them, fragile as it was, would be essential for the days ahead. The first few miles were uneventful. Birds sang from the trees, and the occasional rustle of small animals in the grass reminded John that life in the plains was always in motion. Yet, he remained cautious. The frontier was unpredictable, and travelers often faced dangers ranging from sudden storms to wandering predators or, worse, encounters with bandits. He tightened his grip on the reins and glanced back at Kaya, ensuring she felt secure. "Do you speak English?" John asked softly, unsure if she would answer. Kaya shook her head gently, her long dark hair catching the sunlight. Her silence was not resentment. It was simply the way she measured this strange, new world around her. John nodded, understanding that communication would take patience and time. Words were not the only way to connect. Small gestures, shared movements, and mutual respect would speak just as loudly. As they traveled, John began to notice more details about Kaya. She carried herself with a quiet dignity that was remarkable. Given the hardships the trader had mentioned, her eyes, though sad, seemed to hold stories of courage and survival. Every so often, she would point toward something on the trail, a twisted root, a distant ridge, and then gesture to show she understood the dangers of the land. It was clear she was not helpless. She had learned to live in a harsh and unforgiving environment. John realized how little he knew about her world. The stories of Apache people in the settlements were often told by those who had never truly met them. Fear and suspicion colored the tales, but Kaya's calm and steady demeanor challenged every assumption John had ever held. The realization made him reflect on the narrowness of his own life and the prejudices many settlers carried, often unconsciously. He made a quiet promise to himself. He would treat her with respect, and he would protect her, no matter the cost. Hours passed, and the sun climbed higher, beating down on them with an unforgiving warmth. John offered Kaya a drink from the water skin, and she accepted with a small nod, her movements careful and deliberate. She drank slowly, her eyes scanning the horizon as if measuring the distance and evaluating the terrain. John was struck by her awareness. Even in silence, she taught him lessons about observation and patience. As the journey continued, other settlers began to notice them. Some crossed the trail to pass, staring openly at Kaya. A few muttered words under their breath, judgmental or curious. One man even called out, "Bringing an Apache woman home, are you?" John ignored the comment, keeping his focus on the path ahead. He sensed that Kaya, though silent, felt the weight of the stairs. He gave her a reassuring glance, hoping she would understand that she was not alone in this strange, judgmental world. By midday, they paused near a small stream to rest the horse. John tied the reins to a sturdy tree branch while Kaya stepped down carefully. She knelt by the water, cupping her hands and drinking directly from the stream. John watched her, admiring the simplicity and grace in her movements. There was a strength in her that had been forged through suffering, yet it was tempered by a quiet kindness. John took a moment to eat a small portion of bread he had packed for the journey. He offered some to Kaya, who accepted with a nod. They ate in silence, the only sounds being the trickle of water and the distant call of a bird. In that quiet moment, John felt a strange sense of peace. Though the world was harsh and unpredictable, this woman, who had been bought in a way he still struggled to comprehend, had already begun to change his life. After the brief rest, they mounted the horse again and continued. The trail became rougher, winding through patches of dense forest. The shadows of the trees created a cooler, darker path, and John felt the familiar tension of being alert for danger. Kaya remained calm, her hands lightly gripping the edges of the saddle. Occasionally, she would point to a path or gesture toward a bend in the trail, signaling her understanding of the land. John marveled at how quickly she adapted, how instinctively she read the environment. As evening approached, clouds began to gather, hinting at a possible storm. The wind picked up, rustling the branches and sending a chill through the air. John urged the horse forward, aware that reaching the homestead before dark would be safer. Kaya leaned slightly forward, holding on with quiet determination. Despite the long day and the tension in the air, she never complained. Her resilience impressed John more with each passing mile. Along the way, John attempted to communicate with her, using simple words and gestures. He pointed to the cabin in the distance and said, "Home," hoping she would understand. Kaya's eyes followed the direction of his hand. She nodded slightly, a small smile forming on her lips. It was not a big smile, but it was a beginning. A sign that she trusted him enough to imagine a future beyond the trail. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, the cabin came into view, smoke curling gently from the chimney. John's heart lifted. The journey had been long and tiring, but seeing the familiar structure brought a sense of relief. Kaya looked at it too, her eyes widening slightly, though she remained quiet. John sensed her curiosity and perhaps a hint of hope. The cabin represented safety, warmth, and the possibility of belonging, a stark contrast to the life she had endured until now. They reached the edge of the clearing where the cabin stood. John dismounted first, helping Kaya down gently. She stepped onto the ground, her movements careful but assured. Together, they led the horse toward the small stable, securing it and giving it fresh water. The routine of caring for the animal seemed to provide a sense of normalcy, a bridge between the unknown and the familiar. Inside the cabin, the family awaited. Sarah Matthews looked up as the door creaked open. Her eyes widened at the sight of Kaya, and she took a small step back, unsure of how to react. The children, curious and energetic, gathered around, staring at the woman who had come into their lives so unexpectedly. John felt the familiar flutter of anxiety, but also a quiet determination. He had made a choice, and now it was time for his family to understand and accept it. Kaya stepped inside cautiously, taking in the small space, the simple furniture, and the warm glow of the hearth. She did not speak, but her eyes met Sarah's. There was a moment of hesitation, a silent negotiation of trust and understanding. Sarah, sensing Kaya's gentle demeanor, softened. She nodded slightly, offering a smile. "She's tired," John said quietly. "Let's help her rest." The rest of the evening passed slowly. Kaya was given a warm meal, and though she ate in silence, she accepted it with gratitude. The children, initially hesitant, began to observe her with curiosity rather than fear. Small gestures, a nod, a smile, a careful step, helped to build the fragile bridge of trust between the family and their unexpected guest. John watched the scene with a sense of relief. The hardest part, he realized, was not the journey to the market or the ride home. It was integrating this new presence into their lives with patience and understanding. As night fell, the cabin grew quiet. The wind whispered outside, but inside, there was a sense of calm. Kaya sat near the fire, her eyes reflecting the dancing flames. John and Sarah exchanged a glance, a silent acknowledgement of the unusual path their lives had taken. The decision to bring Kaya home, made in a moment of moral urgency, had already begun to change them. It was more than an act of charity. It was a lesson in compassion, patience, and the human capacity to connect across cultures and experiences. John lay awake that night, listening to the soft breathing of his family and the quiet presence of Kaya nearby. He thought about the journey they had shared, the challenges yet to come, and the strange, unexpected turn his life had taken. What had started as a simple errand to buy grain had transformed into a journey of moral courage, empathy, and understanding. And though the path ahead was uncertain, John felt a quiet hope that together, they could face whatever challenges the frontier would throw their way. Life at the Matthews homestead began to settle into a new rhythm with Kaya's presence. John's family had quickly realized that she was not just a stranger, but someone who carried strength, skill, and quiet wisdom. Every morning, the sun would rise over the plains, casting golden light across the fields, and with it came a sense of possibility. Kaya moved among the family with careful grace, learning their routines while teaching them some of her own ways. The first days were filled with adjustment. Sarah, John's wife, was cautious at first, unsure how her children would respond to having an outsider in their home. But Kaya's gentle demeanor and willingness to help quickly eased those worries. She learned to fetch water, gather firewood, and prepare meals in her own unique way. Her knowledge of herbs and natural remedies impressed Sarah, who had struggled with illness in the small cabin. It was clear that Kaya had survived harsh times and had a deep understanding of the land and its gifts. John watched as his children, initially shy, began to warm to her presence. They were fascinated by her stories. Though told mostly in gestures and drawings in the dirt, she would trace patterns with sticks to explain how to track animals, find edible plants, or understand the signs of approaching weather. The children's eyes would widen with curiosity, their imagination ignited by her quiet lessons. John realized that what had seemed like an unexpected challenge was now an opportunity for his children to learn skills that could keep them safe and resourceful. The neighbors and other settlers soon began to notice the unusual household. Some whispered in disapproval, uncomfortable with the idea of an Apache woman living among the Matthews family. Others were curious, visiting from time to time to observe or ask questions. John had grown accustomed to the murmurs, but he noticed that Kaya handled them with remarkable composure. She would greet newcomers politely, her head held high, and sometimes offer a small demonstration of her skills. Her calm confidence began to soften the skeptical attitudes of even the harshest neighbors. Life on the homestead was not without its challenges. Kaya had never lived in a settler's cabin before, and the close quarters were unfamiliar. Simple things, like sleeping arrangements or sharing meals, required patience and compromise. John and Sarah made sure she had her own space, a small corner of the cabin where she could rest and feel safe. Slowly, Kaya began to make this space her own, placing small items she had carried with her and creating a sense of personal comfort. John noticed a change in himself during this time. He had always thought of himself as practical, focused on survival and providing for his family, but Kaya's presence made him reflect on deeper values, compassion, empathy, and understanding. Every day, he learned more about her past, even without words. Her eyes told stories of loss and resilience. The way she moved, worked, and interacted with the family revealed the strength of her spirit. John realized that his initial act of mercy had opened his eyes to a wider world, one where human connection transcended fear and prejudice. One evening, after a long day of work in the fields, John sat near the fire with Kaya. The children had gone to bed, and the cabin was quiet except for the crackle of the flames. John tried to speak with her, using simple words and gestures. He pointed to himself and said, "John." Then to her, "Kaya." She nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. He gestured to the cabin, then to his family, trying to convey that they were safe and that they would care for her. Kaya responded with a subtle nod, and for a moment, they shared a silent understanding. No words were needed. Their connection was deeper than language. Over time, Kaya's knowledge became invaluable to the family. She taught them how to recognize plants that could be used for food or medicine, how to make simple tools, and how to read signs in nature. John and his children absorbed these lessons eagerly, grateful for the wisdom she offered. Sarah, too, learned from Kaya, appreciating the different perspectives she brought to daily life. The household began to thrive in ways John had never imagined when he had set out to buy grain. Kaya also helped the family understand resilience and endurance in ways they had never experienced. When storms rolled across the plains, she remained calm, showing the children how to reinforce their shelter, protect the animals, and preserve food. Her guidance gave the family a sense of security and confidence they had previously lacked. John often found himself admiring her courage, realizing that her life experiences had shaped a remarkable woman who could thrive in conditions that most settlers would find overwhelming. The children grew attached to Kaya, seeing her as both a teacher and a friend. They followed her eagerly when she demonstrated new skills or led them to explore the nearby woods safely. She was patient with their questions and mistakes, gently correcting them without scolding. The children's laughter and curiosity brought joy to the cabin, blending with Kaya's quiet presence to create a harmonious and lively atmosphere. John often watched them with pride, knowing that the unexpected encounter at the market had enriched their lives in ways he could never have predicted. As months passed, the Matthews family began to form a bond with Kaya that went beyond gratitude. She was no longer simply a visitor or a person they had rescued. She had become part of the family, Her influence extended into the community as well. Neighbors who had once been skeptical began to see the benefits of her presence. They sought her advice on survival skills, medicine, and tracking, gradually gaining respect for her abilities. John felt a sense of quiet satisfaction, knowing that he had helped not just Kaya, but also facilitated a broader understanding among the settlers. Kaya herself began to smile more openly, her eyes reflecting a slow but steady healing from the losses she had endured. She laughed with the children, helped Sarah in the kitchen, and even shared small, personal stories through gestures and simple drawings. John noticed that her confidence grew each day, and he felt a sense of pride and relief in witnessing her gradual transformation. It was as if the homestead had become a sanctuary, a place where she could regain some of the peace that life had so violently taken from her. Despite the progress, challenges still arose. Some settlers remained suspicious or openly critical, spreading rumors or questioning John's judgment. Others struggled to understand the cultural differences and the unfamiliar customs Kaya brought with her. But John remained steadfast. He defended Kaya quietly but firmly, showing that his home and family were places of acceptance, respect, and kindness. Over time, the whispers faded, replaced by cautious admiration and curiosity. John and Kaya also developed their own unspoken rhythm. They worked side by side in the fields, repaired fences, and cared for the animals. Through shared effort, trust deepened. Small gestures, a helping hand, a nod of encouragement, a shared meal created a bond that words alone could never capture. The children observed this bond, learning lessons about empathy, partnership, and the importance of standing by those in need. One day, John watched as Kaya guided his children through a lesson in tracking small animals. She showed them how to observe footprints, signs of movement, and the behavior of birds to understand the environment. The children followed her instructions carefully, their eyes wide with fascination. John felt a swell of gratitude, realizing that the market trip that had seemed so ordinary had transformed into an extraordinary journey of learning and growth for everyone. Evenings became a time for reflection and quiet conversation. Kaya would sit near the fire, sometimes tracing patterns in the dirt with a stick, telling stories of the land and her past. John would listen intently, piecing together fragments of her life, feeling a mix of sorrow and admiration. He began to understand the depth of her experience, the resilience that had carried her through tragedy, and the wisdom she could offer. It was humbling for him to witness, and it reminded him of the value of compassion and patience. Through it all, the Matthews homestead grew stronger. The family learned not just to survive, but to thrive with Kaya's guidance. Crops flourished with her advice on planting and harvesting. The children learned to be observant, patient, and resourceful. Sarah gained new insights into medicine and household skills. And John, once focused solely on provision, discovered a deeper understanding of responsibility, courage, and the power of human connection. By the end of the season, the bond between John's family and Kaya was undeniable. She was no longer an outsider or a purchase from the market. She had become a teacher, a guide, a friend, and a protector. The homestead was alive with laughter, learning, and resilience, a stark contrast to the lonely and uncertain life Kaya had endured before. In quiet moments, John would watch Kaya work in the fields or teach the children, marveling at how a chance encounter at the marketplace had led to such profound change. What had begun as a simple errand to buy grain had transformed into a story of compassion, understanding, and the enduring strength of human connection. He realized that life on the frontier was unpredictable, but with courage, empathy, and openness to the unexpected, it could also be deeply rewarding. Kaya's presence had brought the family closer together, enriched their understanding of the world, and opened their hearts to new experiences. It was a lesson John knew would stay with them for the rest of their lives. And though the challenges of the frontier would continue, the Matthews family now faced them with a greater sense of unity, wisdom, and hope, all thanks to the unexpected journey that began with a simple trip to buy grain. As the seasons changed, life at the Matthews homestead settled into a steady rhythm. Winter brought biting cold and long nights, but Kaya's presence proved invaluable. She taught the family how to preserve food, store firewood, and care for the animals during harsh weather. Her knowledge of herbal remedies helped treat minor illnesses, and her practical skills made the household safer and more resilient. John often reflected on how a single trip to the market, intended only to buy grain, had transformed into a journey that changed the very foundation of his family's life. Kaya had grown more confident with each passing day. She moved through the cabin with ease, helping Sarah with household chores and guiding the children in their learning. The children, once shy and hesitant, now ran to her for advice and play, eager to imitate her movements and learn her ways. They listened intently when she traced shapes in the dirt or showed them how to identify plants in the nearby forest. Her quiet wisdom and gentle discipline became a natural part of their daily life. John noticed how the neighbors' attitudes were slowly shifting. Where once there had been whispers and disapproval, now there was curiosity and respect. Some settlers began to approach the Matthews homestead for guidance on survival skills, impressed by Kaya's knowledge and her calm, practical approach to challenges. Even those who had been skeptical about the family's unusual arrangement now sought her advice on planting, tracking, and herbal remedies. Kaya's influence extended beyond the walls of the cabin, creating a small ripple of understanding and cooperation within the wider community. Despite the progress, life was not without its difficulties. Kaya had endured unimaginable loss, and occasionally, moments of quiet sorrow would pass across her face. John recognized these glimpses of grief and offered his support, giving her space and time to process her memories. Sarah, too, learned to read Kaya's silent signals, offering a comforting presence when the woman needed it most. The family had grown close enough that they could communicate without words, understanding emotions through gestures, glances, and shared experiences. One spring morning, John and Kaya walked together to the fields, checking the progress of the crops. The sun shone warmly, casting long shadows across the fresh green shoots. Kaya pointed out signs of healthy growth, showing John how to identify early signs of disease or pests. She demonstrated how to strengthen weak plants and conserve water for the driest parts of the field. John listened intently, absorbing every lesson. He realized that Kaya's arrival had not just enriched their lives socially and emotionally, but had also significantly improved their chances of survival and prosperity. The children were always eager to join these excursions. They ran alongside Kaya, asking questions and copying her techniques. John watched them with a sense of pride and awe, noticing how much they had grown in confidence and skill since her arrival. Kaya encouraged them patiently, never rushing or scolding, letting them learn through observation and practice. In doing so, she helped them develop independence, curiosity, and respect for the land, a gift that would serve them throughout their lives. As the years passed, Kaya became a respected figure, not just in the Matthews household, but also within the wider community. Her calm presence and practical wisdom made her a natural advisor for neighbors in need. She would visit nearby families, sharing knowledge about crops, herbs, and survival skills. John observed these interactions with a quiet sense of pride, knowing that what had begun as an unexpected circumstance had blossomed into something profoundly meaningful. The woman he had once bought out of compassion had become a beacon of knowledge and strength, touching the lives of many. Within the homestead, Kaya's bond with John and Sarah deepened. Though the initial years had been filled with adjustments and caution, she now felt at home. The cabin, once a small and quiet space for a single family, had become a vibrant home, filled with laughter, learning, and warmth. Kaya's resilience and quiet courage inspired both John and Sarah, reminding them of the importance of empathy and understanding in a world that could often be harsh and unforgiving. One day, during a particularly beautiful spring afternoon, John reflected on the journey that had brought Kaya into their lives. He remembered the marketplace, the moment of hesitation, and the difficult decision to bring her home. At the time, he had worried about the opinions of neighbors, the children's reactions, and the challenges of integrating a stranger into their household. Now, he realized that this single act of compassion had changed everything for the better. It had created a home built on trust, respect, and shared effort. Kaya had also transformed in ways John could see clearly. She was no longer the cautious, silent woman who had arrived at the homestead months ago. Her eyes now held warmth and confidence. Her movements showed ease and comfort, and her presence had become a source of strength for the entire family. She had rebuilt a sense of belonging and purpose that life had once taken from her, and she had done so within a family that respected her for who she was. The community, too, benefited from Kaya's knowledge and patience. Over time, settlers began to adopt some of the skills and techniques she shared, improving their own farms and households. Her influence subtly shifted the dynamics of the area, fostering cooperation and mutual respect. John often felt amazed at how a single act of compassion, a decision made in the marketplace, could ripple outward to touch so many lives. Despite the passage of time and the challenges they had faced, the bond between John, Sarah, Kaya, and the children only grew stronger. They had shared hardships, weathered storms, and celebrated successes together. Every harvest, every lesson learned in the field, and every quiet evening by the fire reinforced their connection. The Matthews homestead had become a place of safety, learning, and love, a stark contrast to the uncertain and dangerous life Kaya had known before. One summer evening, as the family gathered around the fire outside the cabin, John looked at Kaya and felt a deep sense of gratitude. He realized that their lives were richer not because of the grain he had intended to buy, but because of the unexpected presence of a woman who had endured great hardship and yet still found the strength to teach, guide, and love. Kaya's courage and wisdom had shaped the family, strengthened their bonds, and left a lasting mark on the community. The children, now more confident and resourceful, played nearby, laughing and chasing one another across the grassy fields. Kaya watched them with a smile, teaching them lessons in patience, observation, and care. John and Sarah exchanged a glance, recognizing the profound transformation that had taken place within their home. The Matthews family had grown, not just in numbers, but in understanding, compassion, and resilience. As night fell and the stars appeared in the clear sky, John reflected on the journey that had begun with a simple trip to the market. What he had thought would be an ordinary day of buying grain had turned into an extraordinary story of human connection, compassion, and courage. Kaya, once a stranger and a widow living with loss, had become a beloved member of the family, a teacher to the children, and a respected figure in the community. John realized that life's most meaningful moments often came from unexpected choices. By choosing to act with empathy and courage, he had not only helped Kaya find safety and belonging, but he had also enriched the lives of his family and the people around them. The homestead was now more than a place to live. It was a symbol of resilience, understanding, and the power of human kindness. In the years that followed, the Matthews homestead continued to thrive. The lessons Kaya had taught remained with the family, shaping their daily routines, their values, and their relationships. John often told his children about the day he went to the market to buy grain, emphasizing the importance of compassion, courage, and making choices that honor the dignity of others. Kaya, once a figure of loss and uncertainty, had become a living example of strength, wisdom, and the enduring power of connection. Even as the children grew and the seasons changed, the story of Kaya's arrival remained a central part of the Matthews family's history. Her presence had taught them that true courage was not just about surviving the hardships of life, but also about embracing the unexpected, showing kindness in difficult circumstances, and finding common ground across differences. The homestead, once ordinary, had become a place of learning, growth, and love. A place where a chance encounter at the marketplace had turned into a lifelong story of hope and redemption. John often looked out over the fields, seeing Kaya tending the crops or teaching the children. He felt a sense of quiet pride and gratitude. The journey that had begun with an errand for grain had become a testament to the power of compassion and the importance of human connection. Kaya's courage, resilience, and wisdom had transformed not only their lives but the lives of those around them. In the end, John understood that life's true treasures were not measured in coin or possessions, but in the bonds we form, the lives we touch, and the kindness we show to others, even in the most unexpected circumstances.